The following program may contain coarse language, violence, nudity, mature subject matter, or scenes which may not be suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, Xzone Radio TV. And we're coming to you tonight on the Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, Xzone Broadcast Network, Xzone TV channel, and on Simul TV channel 54. My guest this hour is a good friend of the X Zone. In fact, we were just talking before we went on air, and Dr. John Brandenburg is our guest, and he's been coming and going here on this show for the past 25 years. Dr. Brandenburg is a plasma astrophysicist, and let's bring the good doctor on. Hey, John, welcome back to the show. Always great seeing you, my friend.
An honor and a pleasure, Rob, to be on your show.
You know, John, this has been a very strange day in the news. As you and I were talking before, Russia has allegedly here, fired a missile into Poland, which is a member of NATO.
Yes.
And right now, I understand that there's a conference going on with NATO, and NATO may decide to enforce its right by calling in the other members of NATO. I think it's Section 4. I'm not sure about that. And John, these are very, very tense times. I don't think the public listening to us tonight.
I feel badly for some of my old buddies who are still at nuclear weapons labs where I used to work. You've never gone through an international crisis till you've been in a nuclear weapons lab, where you know you're for one thing, you're ground zero 10 times over. Mm-hmm. I went through what's called Able Archer, 1983 at Sandia Lab. I went to graduate school at Lawrence Livermore National Lab, working on control fusion. Then I went to Sandia Labs in Albuquerque, where I worked on control fusion and directed energy weapons, which involve a lot of plasma physics. And we went through the Able Archer crisis, 83. You can look it up on Wikipedia. We came as close to a nuclear war then as we did during the Cuban Missile Crisis, but it was secret. Almost nobody knew what was going on, but we could see something was going on, and it filled my colleagues up and down the hall where I worked with fear and despair. The nuclear winter study had just come out, which by interesting coincidence was the nuclear winter discovery was made because of a dust storm on Mars in 1971. Mars was covered with a global dust storm. They'd never seen anything like it, and it lasted for months while the Mariner 9 probe orbited kind of in hibernation. Finally, it cleared, and they were able to take all these pictures of Mars showing river channels of the Grand Canyon. But people couldn't understand how you could have a global dust storm cover the planet from North Pole to South Pole. And then when they figured out the mechanism, they realized, oh my God, if there was a nuclear war, the same thing could happen. And they published that study in December of 1983, caused by the dust storm on Mars, or inspired by it. And then that may have helped prevent a nuclear war when we had Able Archer 83, which was a NATO exercise that the Russians, feeling very cornered and threatened, felt was a Trojan horse. So we were going to use this big military exercise across NATO as a cover to launch an attack on them. So all it would have taken was one incident like we've just seen today in Poland, and we could have had a global nuclear war. And let me tell you something. when you have situations that can involve chain reactions like a nuclear war, it doesn't take much to start one. It's like a fire at a dynamite warehouse. It can start with a worker smoking outside, throwing his cigarette butt in the wrong place, or a lightning strike on the roof setting off a big fire. It doesn't matter. The end result is everything blows up. And they did that. They found that out from numerous war games that they did at Livermore when I was there. They said it doesn't matter how a tactical nuclear weapon or just a conventional war that starts and just keeps escalating to finally use tactical nuclear weapons, to finally global nuclear weapons, and finally complete exchange. And so I think everyone should calm down about this missile hitting a grain elevator. I know 2 people got killed. I think this is terrible. I think it's time for a ceasefire in Ukraine and a negotiated peace. I know you don't want to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. You want to force him off the throne. Well, sometimes that just isn't possible.
Yeah.
We have to have a peaceful resolution of this. Who cares about the Donbass if the stakes are a global nuclear war resulting? And the Earth will end up looking like Mars.
You know, you mentioned the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I remember that as a child, where we had to go through the exercises of getting under our desks or standing under the doorway, and then they would test the air raid sirens, and we lived right across the street from the air raid siren that was on top of the school. And I'll tell you, when that thing went off, it just crumbled you as a child.
Yes, it is. It was very terrifying. It was supposed to be terrifying. Supposed
So
to make everybody get to a shelter.
Mm-hmm.
But then with the nuclear winter, they found out that even after you come out of the shelter after 2 weeks, there's nothing to eat and everything is freezing cold. More people would die of starvation and cold after the nuclear exchange, the direct casualties from nuclear explosions and fallout, than would have died because of the direct effects of the nuclear waste. The freezing to death and the starvation would kill far more people than the original attack would. And I had a very happy-go-lucky character I shared an office with, and in the middle of the Able Archer crisis, he turned to me. It was after the nuclear winter things had been published, and then the Able Archer crisis happened. He turned to me one day, and he wasn't smiling like he normally was. And he says, "You know, I used to think if there was going to be a nuclear war, we were in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Ground zero, we knew for at least 10 nuclear weapons." And he says, "I used to think I was going to rush home, jump in the car, rush home, get my wife and kids, and head for the hills." He says, "Now I'm going to get up on the rooftop with a 6-pack of beer and watch the whole thing go." And I didn't know what to say to him. And then I finally asked him, I said, "Malcolm, what kind of beer would you be drinking, do you think?" And that brought a smile to his face. But I heard several different statements similar to that from my fellow office, people up and down the hall as we would go to lunch together. And there was just, I myself resolved not to even try to survive the nuclear war. I was just going to go out and stand in the parking lot. I thought, what's the point?
We just checked, and the current DEFCON level at NORAD is 3.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So, that's
wonderful.
Now, whether or not that's the real DEFCON level or
I don't. Look, let's have an armistice, ceasefire in place. Okay. Yeah. Maybe the Russians have taken the Russian-dominated areas of Ukraine. Okay. It's not worth having a nuclear war over. Okay?
Exactly. And, we can think of President Putin as we like, but it could be dissident members of his military that fired that missile.
It could be.
We don't know if he gave the order. We don't know if he didn't give the order. But let's, like I agree with you, John, cool heads have to prevail.
Oh, let's just calm down. Let's have a ceasefire. Call for
Yep.
immediate ceasefire. Let the UN Security Council call for immediate ceasefire and negotiations.
John, stand
Let's
by,
do
my
some
friend.
talk,
Mhm.
rather than shoot.
All right, let's get
Yeah,
all the
let's
leaders
get
of the
down to
world
business.
together. Let's get all the leaders of the world together, get plenty of vodka in the room, and
Absolutely.
let's take care of business. You and I have to take our first break, my friend. Please stand by. Exonation, our guest this hour is Dr. John Brandenburg. He is a plasma astrophysicist. And we're going to be talking about Mars, the little
Yes.
green planet.
Well,
This-
Mars may be an intelligence test for the human race, as it turns out, in terms of nuclear holocausts.
All right, so let's talk about this when we come back. Strange day here in the world.
Strange day,
yeah.
yes.
Let's keep our fingers crossed, John. We'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. Dr. John Brandenburg is my guest. And John, you sent us, the information that we asked you, and something that you wrote in your response to us just kind of grabbed my attention. And it's this, and this is a quote: "Going to Mars is no longer an option; it's a requirement." What do you mean by that, John?
Well, we have now found compelling evidence, and I just presented this at the Mars Society meeting to a bunch of Mars experts, and they tended to agree with me because they asked a few intelligent questions, and no one jumped up and disagreed with me. They just seemed to accept it. And now there is evidence for a massive nuclear holocaust on Mars from unknown cause. We're going to do the Joe Friday version of this. Just the facts, ma'am. And the facts are, we have all this isotopic and physical evidence that there was this massive nuclear holocaust on Mars of let's call it unknown cause. And and that means we have to go up and find out what the hell happened up there. How could this happen? It looks like a supernova went off on Mars, or in fact, two small supernovas went off. It's called you can look it up on Wikipedia. It's called R process. It means a thermonuclear explosion. Basically occurs normally in two places: supernovas or in hydrogen bombs. And there was just massive evidence for a massive event or on Mars that did this and turned Mars into Mars. Now that means we have to go up and find out what happened. The cause is unknown at this point. We have to go up to find out there what happened and how to prevent it from happening here. Because if it happened on Mars, it can happen here.
Has this, to the best of your knowledge, happened on any other planet?
No.
In the solar system? No way.
No, it is not.
If it was,
the isotopes of Mars are unique among the planets and the other the solar system reservoirs that we have sampled. On Earth, in the solar wind, if you average all the meteorites from the asteroid belt, if you put a probe into the atmosphere of Jupiter, something as different from Earth as Jupiter is from Earth, you get the same ratio of xenon 129 to 132, 1 to 1. On Mars, there's 2.5 times more xenon 129 than there is 132. And that was pointed out to me by, I worked at 9.5 years at nuclear weapons labs, and then in Washington, D.C., where I had nuclear weapons experts just down the hall, and they all looked at the data, xenon data from Mars, and said someone nuked them. Wow. That is very consistent. That Mars was nuked, suffered a nuclear holocaust, a thermonuclear holocaust. Now, I couldn't find data. It was very difficult to make the case based on unclassified data. The result of nuclear tests in Earth's atmosphere and plutonium production using fast neutrons. That did increase the amount of xenon 129 in the Earth's atmosphere. But what happened is I found out in supernova simulations, simulating what happened in the core of supernova, that shows, and I found scientific references where people had done simulations of those, and they come out with the xenon 129 spike. And that's a signature of a thermonuclear explosion, either in a supernova or similarly. If you look up our process on Wikipedia, it says it can occur 2 known places. One is in a supernova, big star exploding, or in a hydrogen bomb.
John, do we have any idea on how long ago this thermonuclear holocaust may have happened?
The best data we have is from one Mars meteorite called EETA 7901. In fact, it was the first Mars meteorite ever discovered to be from Mars. And for one thing, it had a lot of trapped gases in it that had a lot of xenon 129, which was very rare. And it was a signature, apparently, because we landed probes on Mars, we measured the atmosphere, and found this xenon 129 spike.
Right.
And so, but the meteorite itself is quite unusual in that it's 2 lava flows, one on top of the other. It's a lava sandwich. And the 2 lavas are slightly different in mineralogy and apparently occurred only hours apart. This is a quite remarkable rock. And so here's this chunk of rock that has a kind of layer running down the middle of it, where half of it is one lava flow and half of it is another lava flow only a few hours later. And they see something like this in Hawaiian lavas. So, and that happened 180 million years ago. They can date the rock. Both of the lava flows are 180 million years ago. They can radiocarbon date, radioisotope date those. Then, what they found was half of the rock had been heavily exposed to neutron bombardment, like from a nuclear weapon or our process event, let's call it, of unknown cause, a thermonuclear explosion of unknown cause. Half of the lava had been heavily bombarded with neutrons, creating a whole bunch of what's called krypton 80. It's another inert gas, and it happens, it is created when you bombard ordinary rock, which always has a little bit of potassium in it. Bromine, which is a chemical like chlorine, only it's heavy liquid. And anyway, it reacts with salts. It forms salts in the rock. And if you hit the bromine 79 with a neutron, it immediately absorbs it and turns into krypton 80, which is a gas, which then oozes out of the rock, diffuses out of the rock into the atmosphere. And part of it remains trapped in the rock. And they found that half of this rock, that one lava flow, is much heavily exposed to neutrons. And the other half, which is apparently only a few hours different in age, shows very little neutron exposure. So that means the event was apparently very intense and short-lived on Mars, about the same time as this lava rock was hardening. So 180 million years ago, that's about the time of roughly the boundary between the Triassic age of dinosaurs and the Jurassic age. Jurassic was, the really fancy dinosaurs. The first dinosaurs were all 4-footed and they had big sails on their back and stuff like this. They were pretty boring. But the Jurassic age, you had 2-legged dinosaurs like Allosaurus and Brontosaurus, and then you had the one with the spikes on its back, the Stegosaurus, and so a lot of fancy dinosaurs in Jurassic age. That the final age was, of course, Cretaceous with the Tyrannosaurus Rex. But Jurassic age, dinosaurs really had a heyday. And so about the time of that transition, Triassic to Jurassic, is when this happened on Mars. So there was nobody on Earth that anything resembling a human being on Earth. In fact, there were only kind of mouse-like creatures, were the only mammals. So we know that approximate date, that this happened on Mars, at least based on this data. And we also then have the new evidence, in addition to finding the supernova simulations showing the xenon spike, xenon 129 spike. We have found out that the Martian atmosphere, which is mostly carbon dioxide and then 2% nitrogen, but no, it's about 3% nitrogen and then about 2% argon, which is an inert gas. They use it for welding to make sure that the metal doesn't catch fire when they weld, like aluminum or something. And so, okay, the nitrogen was heavily bombarded with neutrons, apparently. This happens, they saw this happening in nuclear tests. The neutrons come out of a thermonuclear weapon, exploded in midair. They rattle around through the atmosphere, bouncing off all the oxygen and nitrogen, and then they slow down and then are absorbed by the nitrogen-14, which is the most abundant atmosphere, which turns it into nitrogen-15 with the emission of a gamma ray. The gamma ray will kill you. So when a nuclear weapon goes off, it converts part of the nitrogen in the air from being one isotope, nitrogen-14, into nitrogen-15. And when it does so, it emits all these gamma rays. So the neutrons, which actually have a limited range in the atmosphere, get converted into gamma rays, which come from every direction. It doesn't matter if you're covering up under your desk. The gamma rays will get you because they're very penetrating, very deadly. And so the neutrons get converted into gamma rays by this nitrogen process. And Mars' atmosphere has twice as much nitrogen-15 in proportion to nitrogen-14 as on Earth. Then the argon is almost all argon-40, which is caused by intense neutron bombardment of the potassium in the rocks, converting it from potassium-39 to potassium-40. And then it absorbs another neutron and turns into argon-40 and emits a proton. So it then turns into a gas, which then goes out of the rock. And they found that the nitrogen-15 excess and the argon-40 excess in the atmosphere both appeared at the same time on Mars in recent geologic times. So we have now compelling evidence of an intense, massive thermonuclear explosion, R process occurring on Mars. And the estimates for the power of it is 10 to 100 times the energy of the asteroid impact that killed off all the dinosaurs. This would have been, and it happened on a planet only half the size of Earth, so this would have been absolutely devastating. It turned Mars into Mars from being a planet like Earth.
For how long have the authorities known about this, John?
They have probably been aware of it since 1976. But it was in the middle of the Cold War. You can understand why they would want to keep that, because of public morale. They wanted to keep that under wraps. We were, eyeball to eyeball confrontation with the Soviet Union at the time. They published it so that the Soviets would know about it also. And they, having done a lot of nuclear tests, including the largest nuclear test in history, the Tsar Bomba, 50 megatons, they would have known what this meant. And so the government has been, when I discovered it, was because a nuclear weapons expert told me that's what the xenon spike meant. I didn't work directly on nuclear weapons, so I didn't know about this. I was working on controlled fusion and directed energy weapons. So a guy told me, and then when he told me, he looked embarrassed suddenly, and he realized, oh my God, I shouldn't have said that. He had that look, and he then walked away into the classified area. He said it in an unclassified library at Sandia Laboratories in Albuquerque. And then he walked from the unclassified area into the classified area through a doorway, where it said, only people with security clearance badges can go through this door. So he he excused himself after making that, just blurting that out to me. It's taken me this long to figure out where the strong evidence of this would be. But I managed to finally make, I think, a quite strong case now from the evidence. And I guess I would just have to say that Mars appears to have suffered a nuclear holocaust for unknown. The cause of this is unknown.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to go up now and find out why it happened, how it happened, why it happened, so that it doesn't happen here. And of course, if we hit the nuclear war over the Donbass region of Ukraine, we won't be able to go to Mars. We must go to Mars now, and we must also look at a picture of Earth, look at a picture of Mars, and say a global nuclear war event may have happened on Mars and made Mars the way it is now, from more moon-like than Earth-like, but it started out with a blue planet like the Earth. So we have to take this. This is an intelligence test for the human race. And we have to find out. Going to Mars is no longer optional. It is mandatory if we want to survive.
John, stand by. We've got to take a break. Exonation John Vandenberg is our special guest. And we're talking about 180 million years ago.
Yes.
A thermonuclear explosion on Mars. That's what the evidence is pointing to. Stand by, John. We'll be right back. Dr. John Vandenberg is our special guest. And John, when the last time NASA sent a craft to Mars, did they know about what happened 180 million years ago?
I suspect that in the very highest echelons of NASA, they are aware of this. Myself, when I discovered this, the strong evidence of this, I reported it to the Pentagon, not to NASA. I figured NASA would be pretty useless. And they sent a guy from the Defense Intelligence Agency, whom I knew from my work. They sent him to where I worked, and I gave him a full briefing on all the evidence that I had. This was back in about 2001. And he took careful notes and looked very serious. And then he said, "Thank you, and we'll get back to you." And he reported this to the Defense Intelligence Agency is the CIA of the Pentagon. So he reported it apparently to the Mars desk at the Pentagon. And after 6 weeks, they sent back a message, publish. So the government decided that it was time for this to come out, not from an official source, but from just yours truly. And I first thought it was a natural nuclear reactor that may have gone unstable and blown up on Mars. There were natural nuclear reactors on Earth. And I presented that paper at a planetary science conference, and it was well received. Several people said, "Well, we know there's water on Mars and there's uranium on Mars. This could have happened if it happened on Earth, it could have happened on Mars." But then the xenon spectrum is wrong. It doesn't give the xenon 129 spike because the neutrons have to interact at low energies. You need high energy neutrons to get the xenon 129 spike, like in a hydrogen bomb explosion. So, and not only that, would have created 2 enormous craters at these hot spots you find on the Martian surface of radiation. They're, by the way, when I say they're hot spots, they'd be perfectly safe to walk around in. The radiation levels are low, but the sensors they used were very sensitive, so they could pick up these hot spots relatively to the rest of Mars. So if you take this data and you look at the hot spots to see if there's any big craters there, Mars is covered with craters, but at the areas where these hot spots are, there's really no large craters at all. It's smooth. In fact, it used to be the old ocean bed. And you think, well, maybe the ocean smoothed it out. No, there's one crater that's a big crater that happened right at the edge of the ocean, and it's still very visible. So these things were air bursts. Now, something like that happened over Siberia in 1908, the Tunguska event. But that was just, they checked very carefully to see if there was anything nuclear about that, and there was nothing. It was just a big explosion, like, 40 tons of dynamite falling in from the space and blowing up in midair, flattening all this forest. Okay, so, but these things were air bursts like at Nagasaki and Hiroshima, which didn't create craters, but just they detonated them thousands of feet above the surface to create better shock waves to kill more people. I'm sorry. It was the war, and they were trying to end the war. And we were getting ready for an invasion of Japan. And it would have been just horrendous loss of life, not only for us, but also for the Japanese population. So they wanted to impress the Japanese, so they did that. They detonated midair, no craters, massive shock damage, and that's what these explosions on Mars were like. They were probably kilometers up in the sky when they went off. Whatever went off, went off.
We're looking at 180 million years ago, John.
Yes.
Why is it important that 180 million years later, we go to Mars to find out what happened?
Well, I'm just an Episcopalian, but I do believe in the law of karma. Whoever did this if somebody did this to Mars, they're long gone, and the law of karma has caught up with them by now. But it shows that there are, let's say there are forces in the universe that can cause this sort of thing. We have to find out what those forces are and how to prevent them from acting on Earth. Now, Earth, for one thing, is putting out a lot of radio noise.
It sure is.
Apparently, it's the ground control radars around airports are the brightest thing. You can detect them 100 light years from here.
Wow.
If there was another Earth out there with the same level of racket, not just rock music, especially from the 80s, but from ground radars that run at airports.
Yeah.
If there was another Earth out there, we would be able to detect it 100 light years from here, but we don't. It's quiet. It's very quiet out there. This is called Fermi's paradox. Why is the universe so quiet? One answer, by the way, is truly intelligent species do not advertise themselves. They stay quiet. Hope no one will notice them. Why is that? Well, the universe is apparently a dangerous place. It's as dangerous as it is beautiful. And some of those dangers may be from other intelligent life. We have to accept that possibility.
John, I've got to take my final break. Please stand by.
Sure.
Nation. Our guest is
Anyway,
Dr.
Rob,
John Venberg.
This is great.
Well, we have one more segment, my friend. Please don't go away.
No.
This is, I'm sitting here listening
like a good
to
Canadian, I'm going to wait till the very bottom of the bottle.
There you go, eh?
To the bottom of the bottle.
Don't you know, eh? Yeah. Us Canadians, eh? Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
It's celebrated down here by us Americanos.
All right there, Dr. John. We'll be back on the other side after we finish some good old Canadian screech. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. Dr. John and I will be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. And the X Zone is brought to you by our good friends at Beautiful Mind Coffee. It's great coffee.
It
Visit
sounds
them
like good
online.
stuff.
It is. And what's really good about it, John, it really helps. It helps your brain because it's got maca plant. It has American ginseng and
American
green tea.
ginseng. How
Yeah.
about that?
Visit our
By the way,
website.
here, Rob, I got a question for you. My
Sure.
boss is Canadian, and he's a great guy. And okay, what do you call it if you mix tequila, bourbon, and Canadian Club? And
Wow.
shaken, not stirred. What do you call it?
I don't know.
You call it a North American. Because those are the three nations of North America.
Yeah, that's right. I remember a time when people were worried that that Mexico, the United States, and Canada would form the North American Union, and I don't know what happened to that idea.
Terrible idea.
Yeah.
Not that I there wouldn't be some advantages to it, but we're pretty different.
Oh,
pretty
we sure
different
are.
kettles of fish.
People ask me if I believe in aliens. I said, sure, just look at the southern border of the United States and Mexico. Got a lot of aliens down there.
Well, I tell Mexican Americans, and I'll just mention I had two students who worked for me at this Florida Space Institute. One was Egyptian and one was a Mexican American. I called them my pyramid builders. And the Mexican American, his name was Hector. He's a great guy. He's really smart. They both did wonderful work for me. And he said, the Puerto Ricans and the Colombians, and especially the Cubanos, they don't accept me that I'm Hispanic. He says, it's weird. In fact, I tell them I'm from the West Coast and they say, Tampa? And I said, that's just because they're jealous, because the civilization in old Mexico, the Aztecs, or the Mexica, as they called themselves, from whence we get the word Mexico, the Mexica, they outshone anything in the rest of Latin America. But the rest of Latin America is obsessed with being Spanish. So it's anyway. So I told them, I said, they're just jealous of your civilization that you had in old Mexico, the Mayans and the Olmecs and the Mexica and everything. So that made it feel better.
Well, that's good. We just have to look at the human population on this planet as one race. Let's knock off the color, for God's sake. You get past the skin, we're all the same. So why don't we just knock off the racism, knock off the way that we treat each other, and get back to basics. I don't know.
That's right. Oh, by the way, my girlfriend's out there, Jackie Hunter. She's a science fiction author like me also. And anyway, hi, Jackie.
Hey, Jackie. Welcome to the X Zone.
Welcome to the X Zone. Yes.
So John, what do we do next with this, with the Mars conundrum that we are facing? And
if we're smart, we go to Mars and we find out what the hell happened up there, and we become spacefaring, because it doesn't matter what caused it. The key to preventing it from happening on Earth is to be spacefaring, to be very space capable. It's apparent from the size of the explosions and their detonation points above the Martian surface that this was not launched from. This was not something that came out of Mars.
Right.
This came from outer space. And that means if it was some freak solar flare, which I'm a plasma physicist, so I don't believe that at all.
Right.
But it would be nice. In fact, if it was a solar flare, it would be there's a shortcut to having hot fusion, which I work on. But let's just say whatever happened, weird solar flare, fragment of something from a neutron star, who knows? It doesn't matter what it was. It came from outer space and hit Mars.
Well, we
have to have people in space, in spacecraft, that can deal with things like this coming towards us.
If it was a freak solar flare, wouldn't there be evidence on Earth to substantiate that theory?
Oh,
or would it depend
yeah,
on the
you're
orbit?
right. No, I mean, Mars doesn't have much of a magnetic field, um, and at least not a global one.
Mhm.
So Earth would be protected to a certain extent by its magnetic field. That's why you get the northern lights,
Right.
so beautiful up in Canada. But I can't conceive. I'm fairly open-minded character, but
Yep, you
I
are.
also consider myself a very good plasma physicist, and I can't imagine any solar flare phenomenon causing
Yeah.
something like this. So, for one thing, solar flares don't have thorium and potassium and stuff like that in them. They're all hydrogen, straight hydrogen, basically from the solar wind. So we
Mhm.
are left with a completely anomalous event. It looks like a miniature supernova went off in the Martian atmosphere, and I know of no natural phenomenon that is capable of doing that, and that's a problem right there. We know what that's the elephant in the room.
Sure.
And we also know that we would expect to be picking up soap commercials from Alpha Centauri, from other civilizations. It's the nature of life to spread into all available living spaces and be noisy. Human beings are noisy. So are dolphins. So are killer whales. Whales. They make all this. They're always singing. So it's the nature of life to be spread and be noisy. So the universe, by all reckoning, reasonable reckoning, should be a very noisy place full of soap commercials and radars and all the stuff. That's called Fermi's paradox, by the way. Enrico Fermi said, how come we can't hear anything? It's dead silent out there. Dead silent. And that in itself is ominous. It's like we're in a ghost town of some sort.
Dr. John, you and I have come to the point where we must say so long for tonight, sir.
Thank you so much, Rob. And I look forward to being on your show again.
Anytime, John, you just let us know when you want to come on. We'll make it happen. And I thank you for all the work that you've done over the years, and thank you for your service.
Thank you so much. Let me put it this way. I started having nuclear war nightmares that I hadn't had since I was a kid once I discovered this. And so I finally realized, okay, since they told me to publish, I'm going to just write a book and I'm going to publish this and get it out of my system. And then the nuclear war nightmares ended when I published the book. So I felt kind of compelled to write the book Death on Mars, which has most of the data I've discussed, but it doesn't have the latest data. And so, and presents the whole case.
Now, where is Death on Mars available?
Oh, Amazon.com.
Oh, super. I'll have to get myself
Death on Mars, the discovery of a planetary nuclear massacre.
Dr. John Brandenburg, thank you, sir. Take care of yourself and say hi to Jackie.
Make sure it doesn't happen here, especially over the Donbass or Straits of Taiwan.
We're going to do our very best to help you get the word out there, my friend.
Thank you. That's one reason I'm talking about this so much now, because I recognize the danger of nuclear war has increased over the last couple of years. And all it takes is one stupid thing. One car backfire at the Mexican standoff we have, and everyone will start shooting. And that's
dangerous.
All it takes is one firecracker or car backfire. And it will, if you have a Mexican standoff like we have now between us and the Chinese and the Russians, that's all it could take. And everyone would just start shooting.
Dr. John, have a good evening, sir. Take care.
Peace on earth. Peace on earth.
You bet.
Live long and prosper, everyone. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
You too, John. Take care.
Thank you so much, Rob.
Exonation, my guest this hour was Dr. John Brandenburg. The name of his book is Death on Mars, and these are very tense times, and we hope that cool heads will prevail and we won't have to worry about thermonuclear wars and explosions here on this planet. I'll be back in about 8 minutes from now as the X-Zone continues from our broadcast center and studios right here in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. I'm Rob McConnell. Send me your emails, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. And we're available on all social media sites at X-Zone Radio TV. Don't go away. We'll be back.